Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, major updates in the CEO killer case. Police are questioning an individual found with a gun similar to the one used in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Chris Spears has the latest on the arrest that was made in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A jury has found Daniel Penny not guilty in the chokehold death of a homeless man on a New York subway last year. Christina Corona brings us more on the trial that captured the nation's attention. Who's in charge of Syria and what's next after rebels toppled the government yesterday? What the White House and the Pentagon say about the situation. President-elect Trump's nominees are seeking support on Capitol Hill. This as Trump outlines day one initiatives upon taking office. Jack Bradley reports from Palm Beach, Florida. Social media app TikTok is facing a ban on January 19th. The app and its parent company have asked an appeals court to put the ban on hold. Trump weighs in on what he wants to do about TikTok once he's inaugurated. Jason Blair has the details.
This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. Police arrested a 26-year-old man they call a strong person of interest in the killing of the United Healthcare chief. Mayor Eric Adams and NYPD officials made the announcement this afternoon. The individual was carrying a handgun, a silencer, and a 3-page handwritten document that authorities say expresses anger toward corporate America. NTD's Chris Spears has the story.
Officials tell us a worker at a Pennsylvania McDonald's has identified the person of interest police have been seeking in connection with last week's shooting of the United Healthcare CEO. Luigi Mangione was carrying multiple items that police believe connect him with the incident: a 9mm handgun, a silencer, and multiple fraudulent IDs. One of the IDs matches the one police say the person of interest used to check into a Manhattan hostel. He also had clothing similar to what was worn by the CEO killer in surveillance video.
We have a strong person of interest in the shooting that shook our city last week. CEO Brian Thompson of United Healthcare was the victim of a senseless act of violence. He matches the description of the identification we've been looking for. He's also in possession of several items that we believe will connect him to this incident.
Mangione is being held on gun charges and will be extradited to New York City. There, he'll face charges in connection with the killing of Brian Thompson. That's according to NYPD Chief Joseph Kenney. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the handwritten document Mangione was carrying speaks to both his motivation and mindset.
Earlier this morning in Altoona, Pennsylvania, members of the Altoona Police Department arrested Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old male, on firearms charges. At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan.
NYPD Chief Detective Joseph Kenney answered questions about the handwritten document found on Mangione.
That document is currently in the possession of the Altoona Police Department as part of their investigation. But just from briefly speaking with them, we don't think that there's any specific threats to other people mentioned in that document. But it does seem that he has some ill will toward corporate America.
Mangione graduated as valedictorian of an elite Baltimore prep school in 2016, according to the school's website. The Gilman School's headmaster sent a message to parents and alumni indicating a 2016 graduate was arrested in connection with this case. Mangione earned undergraduate and graduate degrees in computer science from the University of Pennsylvania in 2020, a school spokesman told the Associated Press. Chris Beers, NTD News.
Daniel Penny has been acquitted of criminally negligent homicide in the death of Jordan Neely. Neely died after being placed in a chokehold by Penny on a New York City subway, an incident caught on video that sparked weeks of protests and nationwide debate. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
A Manhattan jury has found Daniel Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely, a 30-year-old homeless man, on a New York City subway in May 2023. The verdict was reached Monday after just over an hour of deliberation. This comes after Judge Maxwell Wiley dismissed a more serious second-degree manslaughter charge on Friday, following 3 days in which jurors were deadlocked on that count. Penny, a 26-year-old former Marine, could have faced up to 15 years in prison for manslaughter or 4 years for criminally negligent homicide. Witnesses said Neely boarded the train screaming about being hungry and homeless, with some recalling he made threats about hurting others. The confrontation between Penny and Neely was caught on video, sparking widespread protests and debates over public safety, mental health, and homelessness. Following the verdict, Neely's father, Andre Zachary, spoke to the media outside the courthouse.
I just want to say, I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. Really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now?
Dante Mills, the attorney representing Neely's family, had this reaction to the verdict.
Jordan Neely was choked to death by someone who didn't care people was telling him to stop. Last week, the jury they couldn't decide on the top charge, but they come back this week and they give up on us.
But some saw Penny as a hero who protected other passengers during the chaotic incident.
I believe that Daniel Penny intervened in good faith in a dangerous situation and acted to protect his fellow subway passengers. And I believe that it would set a dangerous precedent if the jury had sent a message that that were a crime. And so I believe that in finding him not guilty, the jury made the right decision.
Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg responded to the verdict, emphasizing that the case was thoroughly presented with evidence, including videos, medical records, and testimony from over 30 witnesses. Addressing threats made against prosecutors during the trial, Bragg stated, "This is unacceptable, and everyone, no matter your opinion on this case, should condemn it." Penny was later seen celebrating with his attorneys at a downtown Manhattan pub. When asked about the verdict, one of his attorneys expressed satisfaction with the outcome.
No, we think that this should have happened probably on day one, but the important thing is it happened. So we can't control the timing of it, but you can certainly savor the outcome.
This verdict brings the month-long trial to a close. Christina Corona, NTD News.
People in Syria are celebrating today after rebels toppled the decades-old regime, but the future of the country is uncertain. The White House says it's not sure who's in control of Syria at this moment. A power vacuum could lead to hostile forces taking over. Here's the latest.
Celebrations in Syria after rebel fighters led by a terrorist organization toppled the government on Sunday. This comes after decades of Bashar Assad as the leader of Syria. The U.S. labeled him as a brutal dictator in the past. Syrians now hope that things will change in their country.
God willing, in the following days, we will build a new future in Syria. We will not build with just one family that rules the entire country.
The Kremlin on Monday confirmed it granted political asylum to its longtime ally Assad. Russian President Vladimir Putin personally made the decision. The Kremlin didn't comment on Assad's specific whereabouts. Russian citizens welcomed the decision.
He's probably looking for more safe and secure conditions for himself. This is normal when a person is seeking certain safety.
Also on Monday, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin commented on the surprisingly quick fall of Syria's government. Rebels started the latest uprising a bit over a week ago. They first attacked places in northern Syria before advancing to the capital city. The entire rebellion only took days, with multiple cities being taken over in just a short period of time.
I think the entire international community was was surprised to see that the opposition forces moved as quickly as they did. And I think everybody expected to see a much more stiff resistance from Assad's forces.
White House spokesperson John Kirby, meanwhile, commenting on Syria's future and who's in charge after the rebellion.
Right now, the rebel groups are in charge of Damascus. Again, yes, HTS sort of was the vanguard here, but they're not the only rebel or opposition group in Damascus as we speak. And I think they're trying to work that out amongst themselves.
Kirby also suggested it's important to make sure ISIS doesn't fill the power vacuum in Syria. This is partly why Israel is striking suspected chemical weapons sites and long-range rockets in Syria. That's in order to prevent them from falling into the hands of hostile actors.
Several of Trump's cabinet picks are on Capitol Hill meeting with senators today. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us live from Palm Beach, Florida. Good evening, Jack. How are Trump's nominees doing in terms of garnering support ahead of the Senate confirmation process?
Good evening, Tiffany. Well, it seems like the ones who are speaking out about the Senate confirmation process, the senators, the Republicans, they're signaling hopeful for all of these Senate picks, minus Senator Joni Ernst, who the three of the nominees met with today, including Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense nominee. After their meeting today, Joni Ernst did not signal whether or not she would support him or not support him, but she said that it was a productive meeting. And Hegseth also said that it was a great meeting. After the meeting, Ernst said in a statement, quote, "As I support Pete through this process, I look forward to a fair hearing based on truth, not anonymous sources." This is as Hegseth is facing allegations of sexual misconduct as well as excessive drinking, all of which he denies. Now, as for Trump's nominee for FBI head, Kash Patel, he also met with several senators on the Hill. Ernst said about him that he will bring much needed transparency to the FBI. Senator John Cornyn also said that he believes Patel will for sure be confirmed. Take a look.
Well, I had a good meeting with Kash Patel, the president's nominee for FBI director. We still don't know what Director Wray's plans are, but eventually I assume that Mr. Patel will be confirmed as the next FBI director. We talked about the importance of restoring the reputation of the FBI as a nonpartisan law enforcement investigative agency.
Right, and Jack, President-elect Trump's daughter-in-law said she's stepping down as chair of the Republican National Committee for a possible Senate position. What's the latest there?
That's right. So Lara Trump, Trump's daughter-in-law, she's married to Eric Trump. She was appointed co-chair of the RNC back in March, and she announced that she'll be stepping down. This comes amid Senator Rubio, Marco Rubio, who's been tapped to be the Secretary of State, who is also expected to step down before the January 20th inauguration. If Rubio is confirmed, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis will need to appoint a replacement to fill his seat, which ends in 2028. Now, several Republican lawmakers have supported Lara Trump in joining the Senate, including Florida Senator Rick Scott, Congresswoman Anna Pauline Luna, and Alabama Senator Katie Britt. Now, in a recent interview with AP, Lara Trump said that she would seriously consider taking up this position. Tiffany?
And Jack, Trump has laid out more details on how he would address foreign and domestic policy issues on day one in office. This was during a recent interview with NBC. What more has come out?
Right. So what we know so far, he mentioned more about NATO. When asked about if the U.S. would continue to be a part of NATO, he said if the other countries pay their bills. Now, we know that during Trump's first term, he complained quite a bit about NATO countries not paying, but still being a part of NATO, while the U.S. was the biggest contributor and still is. But now, after his first term, more NATO countries started paying in at least something, or a little bit more now. And the Secretary General, who's outgoing, Jens Stoltenberg, even praised Trump for his actions on getting that done. Here's Trump yesterday on this. Watch.
I'm not going to protect you unless you pay. And they started paying. And that amounted to more than $600 billion. That's a big thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be fighting. They wouldn't have any money to fight.
And during that interview with NBC, Trump also talked about how he would, on day one, issue pardons for January 6th people convicted of the January 6th Capitol breach on day one in office, especially for ones who are convicted of nonviolent crimes. Take a look.
These people have been there, how long is it, 3 or 4 years? Okay. You know, by the way, they've been in there for years, and they're in a filthy, disgusting place that shouldn't even be allowed to be open.
And Trump there also mentioned that he would end or work to end birthright citizenship while also deporting families with mixed immigration statuses. Now, he's promised mass deportations and how he's going to do that on day one, as well as starting with illegal immigrants who have commit further crimes.
All right, Jack, thanks for those updates. Social media app TikTok is asking a federal appeals court to delay a law that could potentially ban the platform on January 19th. President-elect Trump comments on how he wants to handle the situation once he's inaugurated. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Short video app TikTok and its China-based parent company ByteDance filed an emergency appeal on Monday to temporarily block a law that could ban the app in the U.S. The ban is set to take place January 19th unless ByteDance divests from TikTok and pending a review by the U.S. Supreme Court. The companies argue that a delay would give adequate time for the incoming Trump administration to determine its position on the law. President-elect Trump was asked on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday his thoughts on a TikTok ban once he's in office. He replied, quote, "If you do that, something else is going to come in and take its place. And
I'm going to try and make it so that other companies don't become an even bigger monopoly. Okay. Because that's what happens."
TikTok has been under fire for years in suspicion of being a dual-use tool for the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. It's also suspected of being a major part of the CCP's ongoing unrestricted warfare campaign to overtake the U.S. as a world power. Earlier this year, senators were given a classified briefing by the FBI about TikTok's national security concerns. Several senators said that Americans would be shocked if they found out about the app's ability to access and track their personal data. The senators also said Americans would be surprised to find out TikTok's ability to expose users to communist propaganda and content the CCP wants them to consume. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The House of Representatives is set to vote on this year's annual Defense Authorization Act. The final text has been stripped of important priorities for House Republicans. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this and other important legislation being considered in the lame duck session of Congress.
The Biosecure Act, a bill that would prohibit the use of federal funds in biotech research with links to the Chinese Communist Party. The Falun Gong Protection Act, a bill that would sanction people and entities linked with organ harvesting in China. And the Counter-CCP Drones Act, a bill that would prohibit the use of federal funds in acquiring drone technology from Chinese companies. All these bills passed the House floor with bipartisan support, but have been removed from the final text of the National Defense Authorization Act released this weekend.
Fundamentally, some of my colleagues on the left are allowing electoral politics to get in the way of doing what is right.
That was Republican Congressman Mike Lawler from New York defending the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, another bill that passed on the House floor with broad bipartisan support and was removed from the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025. Despite these setbacks, House Republicans believe that the National Defense Authorization Act will pass.
I want to make sure that our military and all these other programs are fully funded so that we can protect ourselves from the people that get up every morning and try to kill us. And I spent my entire adult life in combat, so I know what I'm talking about. It's going to get passed.
This year's NDAA includes a 14.5% pay increase for the most junior enlisted service member in the U.S. military. Another bill that is slated to receive a vote on Congress this week is the Kids Online Safety Act.
For COSA, Senators Blumenthal and Blackburn fought to give kids and parents the tools, safeguards, and transparency they need to protect our children's health and online well-being. It ensures that social media companies have a duty to ensure their products do not cause harm to kids and teens.
Over the weekend, Senator Blackburn and Blumenthal released a new version of the Kids Online Safety Act, which they drafted with the help of Elon Musk's X, formerly known as Twitter. Both the NDAA and the Kids Online Safety Act are expected to receive a vote on the House floor this week. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, tensions in the Taiwan Strait. Beijing deployed nearly 90 naval ships in the waters off Taiwan, a move that Taipei calls gray area harassment. And the Chinese regime expanding its religious persecution across the globe. New reports of a leaked meeting reveal the communist dictatorship wants to take down the spiritual faith Falun Gong worldwide. Our Stephanie Cox speaks to a senior investigative reporter at the Epoch Times for more insight when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Taiwan raised its alert level after detecting up to 90 Chinese ships in the waters around the island. Taiwanese officials say China has set up 7 reserved areas of airspace, which temporarily put restrictions on who can fly through them.
Taiwan raised its alert level on Monday as it said that Chinese vessels were massing in the area. In what are likely to be military drills, a senior Taiwanese security official said Beijing currently has nearly 90 naval and coast guard vessels in waters near Taiwan, the southern Japanese islands, and the east and south China Seas. China, which claims democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory, had been expected to launch a fresh round of military exercises. That's in response, security sources said, to Taiwan President Lai Ching-te's trip to the Pacific, which included stopovers in Hawaii and the U.S. territory of Guam. Beijing's defense ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but at a foreign ministry briefing, spokesperson Mao Ning dismissed Taiwan's concerns by asserting China's claim over the island. Lai and his government reject Beijing's sovereignty claims, saying only Taiwan's people can decide their future. Speaking at a U.S. naval base in Japan on Monday, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called China the only country in the world that has the intent and increasingly the capability to change the rules-based international order. Though he added that he did not believe an attack by China was either imminent or unavoidable.
As part of a new effort to target Falun Gong globally, the Chinese Communist Party is ramping up its efforts to target NTD News and its sister media, the Epoch Times, right here in America. Chinese leader Xi Jinping gave the order in a secret meeting at the end of 2022. Details of the meeting have just come to light through a Chinese dissident with connections to high-level Chinese officials. He received information from 2 separate sources. At the secret meeting, Chinese leader Xi Jinping ordered high-level officials to use American media companies and the U.S. legal system to attack groups founded by Falun Gong practitioners. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a spiritual practice that has been violently persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party for 25 years. To escape persecution, many practitioners came to America, where they launched efforts to raise awareness of the Communist Party's human rights abuses. At the secret meeting, Xi said the growth and influence of NTD and the Epoch Times is a, quote, dire situation for the CCP. Xi also ordered social media attacks on Falun Gong. He told the CCP to direct their energy towards smearing Falun Gong's founder. Since the meeting, dozens of social media accounts have sprung up, specifically targeting Falun Gong and Shenyuan Performing Arts. Shenyuan is a classical Chinese dance company founded by Falun Gong practitioners. It depicts a traditional China as it existed before communism. One Chinese-American social media influencer publicly claimed credit for helping the New York Times launch a number of attack pieces targeting Shenyuan. The arts company called the articles one-sided, deeply flawed, and says they have helped bolster the communist regime's efforts. Earlier today, NTD's Stephanie Cox spoke to Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Nan Su for more insight.
Now, Falun Gong is not political. It has no political agenda. It hasn't built up any party to fight against the CCP. Why are its activities overseas such a major issue for Xi Jinping?
Well, basically, think about in the last few years what has happened. In last few years, China, the CCP actually had three major events, which basically entirely overturned its own image in the Western world. The Western world has been waiting for a political reform of the CCP and hope CCP one day can join the democratic society and become a democratic nation. But over the past, I would say, ever since 2019, there were three major events took place. Number one is in June of 2020, the CCP had this so-called Hong Kong national security law intact. And number two, they try to hide why the coronavirus was leaked. And number three, it's the Ukraine war that Beijing has been supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that three things really overturned the image of CCP in the Western world. And now China's economy has been going down after it peaked in 2019. It's been continuously going down. And all of a sudden, the Chinese Communist regime found that they are at a spot. They really need investment technology. Also, they want to rely on the export to the Western world to, boost their economy. So the image of CCP in the Western world become a major issue because of investments are leaving China, and then the public opinion about CCP has been really bad. One recent survey shows the Americans have over 75% of Americans actually hold negative opinions on China, which is a major hurdle for the CCP to boost their economy. So they really, and they found, and the reason, and one of the major reasons that caused this issue is that the overseas Falun Gong practitioners in more than 20 years of time in the past, they continuously, non-stop, to review the bloody history as well as the evil nature of the CCP to the Western governments as well as the Western societies.
Yeah, all of that information coming out really could impact the way that these Western nations interact with the CCP and, of course, directly influence the country and its economy and opportunities. But according to the latest report, Xi Jinping is telling the CCP to use U.S. media and the U.S. legal system to go after Falun Gong practitioners right here on U.S. soil. From your research and experience, is this a new approach or perhaps an expansion of something that they've been doing already?
Well, in the past, their main effort really was to focus on persecuting the Falun Gong practitioners inside China. Now, in our report indicated that in October of 2022, just prior to Xi Jinping, secure its third term as a CCP leader, Xi Jinping had a high-level meeting which was joined by MSS, Ministry of State Security, that's in the National Security Department of CCP, as well as the Ministry of Public Safety Bureau, which is the police department of the CCP, and the so-called Political and Legal Affairs Commission, which is the highest CCP organ that in charge of all legal system of CCP, including their court system, their district attorneys, attorney general's office, as well as their police department. And then the Political and Legal Affairs Commission was put in charge, and Xi Jinping instructed them to do specifically three things. Number one, to use a smear campaign to conduct a character assassination of Falun Gong's founder, Mr. Li Hongzhi, as well as several Falun Gong affiliated groups outside of China, like Falun Gong affiliated media, as well as Shenyun Performing Arts, which is it's a performance, it's art performance going around the world. They conduct more than 800 performances on top theaters around the world each year. And number two, not to use CCP's state-owned media, but mainly the social media platform outside of China, and the independent media who has close ties with the CCP in the past. And number three, they want Xi Jinping want all these top CCP organizations to use the secret agents that's embedded in the Falun Gong group overseas in the past, and ask these people to create some sort of incidents which will trigger U.S. government's legal investigation against the Falun Gong.
Right. So, and just a note here, knowledge is power, right? So she has reportedly said that the growth and influence of media companies founded by Falun Gong or Falun Dafa practitioners in America, that's primarily the Epoch Times and NTD sister media, they're especially, she says that they are especially problematic for the regime, that we are especially problematic for the regime and its ambitions to wreak all of this havoc and human rights abuses. So I want to just extend my thanks to you and welcome everybody to check out the Epoch Times for more information on China. Thank you so much, Nathan Su. Great to speak with you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, what to expect as rebel forces topple the regime in Syria. And Middle East affairs analyst joins us to unpack the latest situation. South Korea imposed a travel ban on President Yoon Suk-yeol. That's amid growing calls for him to step down following the failed martial law attempt. That and more after the break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Police arrested a person of interest who was wanted for questioning in connection with the killing of United Healthcare CEO. Law enforcement located 26-year-old Luigi Nicholas Mangione at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after receiving a tip from an employee. Former Marine Daniel Penny was found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide in the 2023 death of Jordan Neely on a New York City subway. The chokehold case received national attention, and there were dueling demonstrations outside the courthouse. Rebel fighters in Syria, led by a terrorist organization, toppled the government of President Bashar Assad, who fled to Russia and was granted political asylum. The U.S. struck ISIS targets in Syria to prevent power from falling into their hands. Joining us now to discuss the situation in Syria is Gerard Filitti, Middle East affairs analyst and attorney specializing in international law. Gerard, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. To begin, now that the Assad regime and Iranian forces have withdrawn from Syria, what is next for Syria, especially given that the leader of the rebel group is labeled as a terrorist by the U.S. and has a $10 million bounty on him?
Well, what's next is nation rebuilding. There is dust to settle as Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, who is, as you pointed out, a terrorist, is designated by the U.S. and the British governments as a terrorist. He started in al-Qaeda before merging and becoming a terrorist leader in Syria. But ultimately, what needs to happen now is there needs to be consolidation. There are many different factions that have been vying for power fighting the Assad regime. These included the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the organization that took Damascus over the weekend, but it also included other terrorist organizations and other fighters. So what needs to happen now is there needs to be some kind of an agreement on power sharing or how to structure the new government now that Assad has left the country.
And expanding on that, the rebel group that seized power, HTS, has promised to be an inclusive government, as reports note that Christians, Kurds, and other minorities are feeling anxious. What are you expecting from whoever the next government is?
Well, it's really difficult to say. We have seen more moderation in the public stances of this terrorist organization, but again, this is a terrorist organization. It started off as al-Nusra, before that al-Qaeda. This is not a group that is known for its sympathy with Western-style democracies, or even to the standard of living that most Syrians had become accustomed to under decades of the Bashar family. So what we expect is that this group will try to appear more moderate in order to gain support from the West, to gain acceptance among Western diplomats and from Middle Eastern countries in order to entrench themselves and hold on to power. What they actually will do is anyone's guess, whether they will revert to their state of being more hostile towards rights of people or maintain this more open and progressive stance.
And the U.S. has around 1,000 troops stationed in Syria. President Biden has indicated they should remain. Meanwhile, President-elect Trump has said the U.S. should not get involved in the conflict. What do you think the U.S.'s role should be in this region?
Well, at the present, the U.S.'s role is active in making sure that the chemical weapons and other weapons of mass destruction that the Syrian government under Assad had do not fall into the hands of terrorist organizations who'd use them against us and our allies in the region. This is the primary mission now of the U.S. forces there and of other allied personnel involved in this. We saw airstrikes carried out over the weekend by both Israel and the United States against some of these facilities. Beyond that, the United States has an interest in maintaining support for the Kurdish Turkish forces in northeastern Syria that have been allies of the United States in fighting these terrorist organizations. I think we will see some version of continued U.S. presence in the near future, but Donald Trump has indicated that he wants to withdraw completely from Syria.
And what can we expect to see from Iran and Russia?
Iran is no longer in a position to exert as much influence on Syria now that Hezbollah has largely been decimated in its fight with Israel and pulled out of its involvement in Syria, and its allies within the Syrian regime have now left the country. So Iran, which has been using Syria as a transit point for weapons to its proxies in Lebanon and Gaza, now no longer has that opportunity. Iran will be more concerned now about making sure that they're not attacked by terrorist groups in Syria that actually don't like the Iranian regime much. As for Russia, Russia will continue to be very much interested in the situation. It's important to point out Russia has a naval base on the Mediterranean, a warm water port that it uses for maintenance of its ships, and it's not willing to relinquish control of that base. It also has an airfield that it uses in Syria, and these are very important in Russia's military system. So we expect that Russia will continue to put pressure on this new government, whatever it may be, to allow Russian presence in Syria, and will fight back if there are terrorist attacks conducted against its facilities.
And for some wild cards in the region, reports indicate Israel could seize this chance to take more land. Turkey's President Erdogan has a vision of restoring the Ottoman Empire, and Iraq and Jordan have locked down their borders with Syria. What can we expect to see in terms of an international response here?
I think that a lot of the international response will have to come from the Middle East itself. We will see countries like Saudi Arabia, like the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. They all have an interest in regional stability and in helping Syria rebuild itself as a more open system that is not a threat to the status quo in the region. So all of these countries will have an interest in helping economically and to maintain the peace. The United States, Britain, the Western countries will have less of a role there, other than to try to keep China from exerting an undue influence as it has tried to do in other parts of the world. Ultimately, Turkey does certainly have interests in Syria. Turkish Kurdish forces, which are not part of the Turkish government, but rather more of a separatist group, they also see a potential separate state of Kurdistan in northeastern Syria. And Israel, of course, has security concerns in the Golan Heights region in southern Syria, in the western of Syria, where they took some land to prevent more terrorist attacks from occurring against them. I don't think that this is a situation that will stabilize anytime soon, and we will see continued focus on different groups within Syria with different alliances vying for power for years to come.
And finally, how does what's unfolding in Syria impact Americans? In other words, why should Americans pay attention?
Americans should be very concerned because whenever you have a country that is on the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, so close to the rest of the world, that is become lawless and a breeding ground for terrorists, these terrorists will very easily make bases there that they will then use to train troops to attack Western interests. An increase in terrorist attacks is very possible if Syria remains divided under the control of different terrorist organizations. The other thing that needs to concern the U.S. and Western powers is a potential migrant crisis. We've already seen during 13 years of the Syrian civil war that many migrants have fled to Europe and eventually making their way to America as well. And this is a humanitarian crisis that needs to be avoided by finishing the fighting in Syria and helping that country rebuild.
Gerard Filitti, Middle East Affairs analyst and attorney, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
South Korea President Yoon Suk-yeol has been banned from leaving the country. A Justice Ministry official told the committee today the travel ban order has been executed. Here's more on that and the market's reaction.
South Korean stocks took a fresh hit Monday, reacting to the country's deepening political turmoil. Over the weekend, President Yoon Suk-yeol survived a bid to impeach him over last week's short-lived declaration of martial law. But media reports say he has been named by prosecutors as the subject of a criminal investigation over the incident. And Yoon's own party, which boycotted the impeachment vote, says he will be excluded from his duties and pressed to step down. The country's benchmark Kospi stock index was down over 2% by early afternoon amid the chaos. Blue-chip names are among those to take a hit, with Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor both down around 1%. On currency markets, the Korean won traded broadly flat versus the dollar, having endured sharp falls during last week's drama. Over the weekend, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok said the government was ready to act in the market. He said maintaining credibility was the priority and vowed to work with the country's central bank to calm any volatility. Even so, tensions remain high, with uncertainty over Yoon's fate and his grip on power. On Monday, the Defense Ministry said he was still Commander-in-Chief and thus head of the armed forces. But multiple military officials and the acting Defense Minister all said they would refuse to obey any new order to impose martial law.
Coming up, the New York Mets have reportedly signed outfielder Juan Soto to a record-breaking contract. Dave Martin joins us with the details after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Martin now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in baseball, where the New York City Mets have reportedly signed prized free agent Juan Soto to a record-breaking $765 million deal. What was your reaction to the news?
I mean, I'm stunned at the amount. It still is. I wasn't surprised it was the Mets. I mean, they have the richest owner in the game in Steve Cohen. I thought it was between the Mets and Yankees. Pretty much everyone thought it was. But $765 million, that's not only bigger than Shohei Ohtani's $700 million deal. It's the biggest in baseball history. It's the biggest in professional sports history. Now, unlike Shohei's contract, there's no deferred money in this. Now, reportedly, the Yankees offered $760 million over 16 years. The Mets deal is $765 over 15, so a slightly higher per year average. I would have thought if they were close, he probably would have chose the Yankees, given he played there last year. Plus, the Yankees have that much more glorious history. I mean, they're the best franchise in baseball by quite a ways. In any case, the Mets now have the best hitter in the game at a very young age, so big get for them.
Shifting gears to football, your Kansas City Chiefs clinched their 9th straight division title yesterday with yet another close win, decided on the final play of the game. Do you think all these close games will help them in the playoffs?
I hope so. I mean, they're my Chiefs, right? You know, I'm very back and forth on this, though. I mean, they certainly understand the best ways to win these close games, whether it's running the 2-minute drill or whatever. I think you can also say they've been very fortunate. You know, a week ago, they won a close one over the Raiders, only because the Raiders fumbled the ball at the end, and it was an unforced error, too. Otherwise, they were in position to win. Now, last night, the Chiefs again won a last-second field goal that hit the upright and then bounced through. Very fortunate there again. You never know which way a football is going to bounce. And that was from their third-string kicker. Maybe I feel better about their chances. They still had Harrison Butker kicking for them. He's injured right now. So anyway, I still don't see them winning a third straight Super Bowl. I'd love to see it happen. Usually these close calls kind of a way of evening themselves out over the course of the season, in my opinion anyway.
Well, looking at college football, the long-awaited playoff field is now set. What do you see as the best matchup in round one?
You know, I think Indiana versus Notre Dame, you almost forget this is an in-state rivalry. The Hoosiers, they've really never been good football until this season. Now they can spoil a great season by their rival Notre Dame. Granted, this game's going to be in South Bend, so it's not going to really be easy for them to pull the upset. I think also Tennessee versus Ohio State, two very good teams that just missed out on their conference championship games. This is going to be in Columbus. If the Buckeyes win, they'll get a second chance against Oregon in the next round. Really, all four games look good. SMU and Penn State both looked impressive Saturday despite losing. Then you've got Texas hosting Clemson. The Longhorns are 11-point favorites though there. These games start in like a week and a half, right during bowl season actually. So I'm looking forward to all four of them.
Looking at tonight's Monday Night Football game, we have Dallas versus Cincinnati in a matchup of teams most thought would be playoff bound.
Yeah, instead both teams have losing records, yet neither is mathematically eliminated yet. Now the Bengals 4-8, they are in dire need of a win. You know, it's not easy, of course, when you surrender the second most points in the league, better than 28 a game. It's really wiped out another great season from Joe Burrow. He leads the league in touchdown passes and passing yards per game. Not surprisingly, Jamar Chase leads in touchdown catches with 13. Now looking at the rest of the Bengals schedule, it's certainly possible that they could win out, but even that doesn't guarantee them a playoff spot. Dallas, meanwhile, they're still without Dak Prescott, but they have won 2 straight games with Cooper Rush there at quarterback. If they pull off the win, it would put them in a 4-way tie for 9th place in the NFC. Of course, only the top 7 make the playoffs. There's still 4 games left. So it's 2 desperate teams tonight. Game starts at 8:15 Eastern Time on ABC, ESPN.
Well, Davis Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.